I had the opportunity to sit down with Noah a couple weeks ago over at the VMFA, which was really cool. It's neat for me. I'm necessarily an artist, but to go to an art museum and sit with an artist, I mean, it's kind of cool. He shared his story with me and Diane, kind of how he got to where he is, and just his journey coming here, and I'm really excited that he's here to share it with you guys. It's a great story. Our theme this month is work, and so he's going to specifically kind of share his perspective on the idea of work. Noah can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say, just from getting to know him, he's first and foremost an artist, I would say. He's an activist. He's a consultant to Fortune 500 companies on creativity and productivity in the workplace. And I think he's an asset to our city. So, Noah Scalin.
I didn't know I'd have to follow a magic act. Great. God, the pressure's on now. Actually, I actually love a little bit of pressure, and so when I got asked to do this, it was a real honor. It came with the theme of work, which I like because it actually meant I had something to push against, something to come up with, but it meant that I was going to give a talk I'd never given before. So the fun part of that is that there's a little nervous energy, which I like. It makes me better. But that's an important part of work for me, at least. Let's have a little pressure, a little stress. So when I thought about work, I started thinking of what I knew about it and what on earth I could tell you about it. So I thought I'd do a list. So let's start. This part is interactive. So once you figure out what you're supposed to do, join me, okay? Anything other than work, right? Do you know the song? What? I just wanna. There we go. Okay, so sorry for the young folks who are like, what's going on right now? But there's a song that ends with, I want to bang on my drum all day. And the thing is like, right? Nobody wants to work. Work sounds terrible, except that, we all do it all the time. And actually, I do like working because I get to bang on my drum all day, or in my case, make art all day. And so that's the first thing I know about work. I don't want to do it. I'm glad you said I'm an artist, because that is how I see myself and how I present myself. But I always knew I was going to be an artist because both my parents are artists. My dad's actually here. Here's a picture of him and my mom. In what year is that? 1968. Here in Richmond. So yeah, I knew I'd be an artist. And I realized that's a rare and lucky thing, right? Because that when I was expressing my creativity as a child, there was no question that I got to do and be creative, and I could say I'd want to be an artist, and there was no question. The problem is that both my parents were artists, but neither of my parents made a living making art. So my first lesson about work was that you had to do something else to make a living than do art, which was a problem because I wanted to make art. So I was a very weirdly practical child. And I was like, okay, well then I got to do something else that's practical. What's practical? Okay, I'll go to school for theater. So I went to theater school. That's practical, right? It turns out it's actually a really great thing to study. I learned a lot of amazing things in theater school, which I use all the time. But when I got there, I learned something. I think a lot of people know this chart. Pick two. That's what you get, right? We know this. Except I will say in college, sometimes you can pull it off and get all three. Mostly because you've got great, hopefully, people you work with and you're willing to stay up all night. But that doesn't last forever. And so I think what's more important about this chart that I learned and I apply and I tell students and I tell clients all the time is the problem is when you offer this up as an option, what most people want is that. Don't spend your time making fast, cheap things. It's not worth it. So when I was getting ready to graduate from school, I realized I actually wanted to do graphic design. I enjoyed doing that aspect of that for theater. So I was doing posters and props and things that involved graphic design. And so I was getting ready to head into the world. But the other thing about me is not only I'm an artist, but I'm an activist. And that meant that I wanted to live based on my ethics. And when I got ready to graduate school and I said, well, how do you do that as a job? And people said, oh, no, you don't. You give up your ethics and then you go to work. And that sounded terrible to me. And so I said, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make a way to do it where you could do both, where you could live by your ethics. And people said, that's impossible. Don't say that to me because that makes me do it. So I learned that when people told me I couldn't do things I wanted to do, I would do them. And in this case, this is what I saw about the world, right? That once you get out of school, you're going to spend your waking hours working, and then hopefully what's left of them, you can make a difference. But the problem with that equation is that at best, if you're spending all day doing some horrible thing, you maybe can make up for it in your free time, and then you've zeroed out. And probably you never even get to the plus side. That sounds terrible. And so my idea was to do that, to create a company that would let me make a difference all day long and feel better about myself and the world. And that's what I did. I built it as a model to show other people it was possible because people told me it wasn't. And the cool thing, really, as an activist is that, I learned as an activist that to make a difference, it's incremental. And it's going to take a long time. And you might never see change in your lifetime, which is really daunting. But I learned to embrace that. And so what was wild is that when I started a socially responsible business, what I call a socially conscious design firm, within my lifetime, in fact, within 10 years, I went from people thinking it was nuts to people being like, yeah, okay, that's a thing, sure. Right? And now every corporation has a sustainability section. They talk about green stuff. They talk about environment. All this stuff becomes every day. Not that it's mainstreamed entirely, but it's certainly something people know about. And that's a pretty amazing transformation. And the thing I learned about doing this kind of work was that when I put myself out there as a socially conscious designer and said that's what I do, then that's the work I got. And I didn't spend my time weeding out the crap that I didn't want to do. And so I spent several years as a graphic designer, socially conscious graphic designer, making work I wanted to make for clients that were really cool, that came to me because they knew I was cool. In fact, this is for a local organization, the Virginia Sexual and Domestic Violence Action Alliance. And they actually were looking for people to do their logo and branding and eventually marketing campaigns. And I interviewed with them, and they said, they chose me to work with them, and they said, actually, we got an offer. A major local advertising marketing firm is going to do this whole thing for free. But we decided to pay you money to do it because you clearly care about this issue, and we know you're passionate, and we know you're going to do a great job. And they never regretted that decision. And that was an amazing thing to learn because I could have offered it for free too, and then where would I have been? And so I got to do things like make this is called the Red Flag campaign, and basically it was supposed to be just in Virginia. It was about teaching college-age students about dating violence and that it can affect them. It's not just about old married couples, but it's people who are all different ages. And this campaign ended up going nationwide. So it was so successful that it went across the US. That's the pinnacle of the kind of work I did in socially conscious graphic design. Work that I liked doing, work that had a potentially huge positive impact, that when people saw it, if I did it well, could change lives. It was amazing. The problem is that after doing this for several years, I realized that I was working and I wasn't making art anymore. And I'd lost my vision. I was successful at doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing, being creative for a living, but now it was just work. It was rote. And I wasn't inspired. I wasn't creative anymore. I wasn't liking it. I wasn't getting anything out of it. And I needed to change that. And the way I did that, and maybe some of you know about that, is that I with skulls, of all things, I was walking through Maymont Park here in Richmond and had a vision. I should make a skull every single day for a year. And I thought, sure, why not? I should do that. I'll show people I can make art. And rather than tell you about it, see if I can do this right here. Here we go. Rather than tell you, I'll just show you every single one. 365 skulls. Don't worry, it takes 1 minute. Hi, I'm Noah Scalin, and I made a skull a day for a year. So, what are you going to make? Thank you.
Did you eat all the food based on?
Most of them when they weren't really filthy. Let's see if I... So I learned a ton from that experience, and I got a lot of amazing things happen to me, and it really transformed my life in the ways I wanted it to, because it got me to focus on making art again. But it also taught me this crazy lesson, which I had never thought about how my process worked as an artist. I always just made art. I grew up making art. I never thought about how it got made. And so especially when I got stuck, I had no idea how to get unstuck until I went through this process by which I had to basically have these crazy limitations, crazy deadlines, very specific thing I was going to make every single day, all this pressure, and that made me the most creative, inspired I'd ever been in my life. And so I realized that there was this equation here I'd never thought about, because we know the word artwork, but I never really thought about the work part of that, and that it really was work. But the cool part is that when you make art your work, right, you can make your work into art. And yeah, I'll leave it at that point. Let's go to number 7. The cool thing about this project was that once I did this and showed people what I was capable of, people came to me asking me to do things like that. And I could show people what I was capable of doing and offer them opportunities to look at, like, here's an example. I've already done this cool thing. What else could I do? And so my work transformed. I suddenly was making design work that I was excited about again, that I was fun, that was what I wanted to make. I ate those before I made those. That's how that worked. I got paid to eat out. That was a pretty good deal. And I was a much better artist than I was before I started that process. But more importantly, not only was I being given these opportunities to do much better work that I liked doing, work that was more creative, more interesting for me, but more opportunities to be the artist that I already knew I was. And instead of begging for galleries to show my work, instead of asking people, writing for grants, people came to me, and in this case, the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia. Is anybody familiar with Mutter? Yeah. It's over 100 years old. They've got medical specimens and jars and really cool stuff. And they called me and said, would you make art here, just because of my project? And when I went in there, I said, well, what can I work with? I work with my hands. I'm making stuff out of everyday objects. What do you got that I could use? And they said, oh, well, yeah, you're right. We don't have much. But we just got in a shipment of hundreds of slices of real human brains. Would you like to work with that? Yes, I would. I mean, what a crazy opportunity that was. Only the curator normally gets to handle those things. And that's what came to me. And it's no longer about skulls. It's just about my opportunities to make art now have grown, and I'm able to work out the things I wanted to work out and show the work to the people I want to show. In this case, it's my most recent body of work that was just exhibited in New York City. A gallery that came to me again because of the Skull a Day project. I didn't have to prove myself because it was already out there in the world. So as I said, I learned these crazy lessons from this project, and one of which was really that it was a process of art making, and that process was really useful, and that I could activate that within myself and be creative on the spot and really change how I thought about how creativity worked, how art worked, how work worked. And what was interesting is that not only was it affecting me in my own work, but other people that were encountering the project. And then I was being given opportunities to tell people about what I had done in business. And I never knew that the work I did had an impact on the corporate world. And yet it did, and so now it's a business. And I go travel the world talking to people about creativity, people who don't think they're creative, people whose jobs are not defined as creative. And I'm helping them see their creative potential by teaching them about the value of the artist's practices. And that changes the value of artists then in the eyes of business, which is something important to me. And so a whole new role and opportunity has grown out of putting myself into the world in this way, a completely unexpected one. When I was thinking of this list, I'm like, of course you want a nice round number 10, but what on earth am I going to, how much do I really know about work? And then I realized there's something that I've been thinking a lot about, which is this phrase, work-life balance. Because people started asking me about that, because I do a lot of work and I do a lot of stuff, and I'm very busy all the time. And so they would ask me, well, how do you work out work-life balance? And I hear that phrase, and I had no idea what people meant by it. I mean, I was like, work is your life and your life is your work, and that's it, right? And then I had a kid. And then I realized, oh, that's what they're asking about. And so I'm going to tell you right now, if your question is, how do I get work-life balance? My answer is, you're working too much. This is what's important. And I have a very strict schedule now. I work 8 to 4 Monday through Friday, and sometimes just Monday through Thursday. That's it. And you know what? I get to spend the rest of the time with her and my wife, and I'm just as productive as I always was. I still get everything done. I'm busy as hell, but that time is just used more efficiently. So what's the penultimate? That's the ultimate one. That was the penultimate one. So what's the ultimate point? Of the things I learned in the project, and I learned many, and the things I've learned about work, I've learned a lot. I think the thing that was most striking to me was the fact that it wasn't about doing perfect stuff. It wasn't about, having brilliant ideas. It was about showing up and doing the work. That was it. If I showed up every day and did my skulls, if I show up every day and do my creative work, if I put myself into the world and I share it publicly all the time, things come back to me, things happen. And so the metaphor that I've now teach people a lot about is around creativity, is that it's not a well within us. It's not about being creative or not creative. And it's not about dipping into that well and using that creativity up. The metaphor I use now is snowballs. Everybody can make a snowball. Kids make snowballs all the time. They're easy. And you don't have to make a perfect snowball. It just has to be a ball, right? But the trick is, if you're standing at the top of a mountain and you start making snowballs and you start rolling them down, one of them is going to catch and make an avalanche. Who knows which one? And the more that you roll down, the more likely that is to happen. And so that's the thought I want to leave you with today. Thanks, you guys.